We can see you want a clean, simple story, where the bad guy doesn't slip on a banana peel. He slips on his own paperwork. That's exactly what happened to me. I work in a mid-sized company where everything is tracked, not because we're paranoid, but because we're busy. Tickets, approvals, shared docs, change requests, the kind of place where you can't sneeze without a timestamp ending up in a system somewhere. I'm not in a glamorous role. I'm the guy people message when something breaks, when a report is wrong, when a client is angry and the account manager needs someone to, please fix it today. I used to like that. It made me feel useful. Then my coworker decided I should fail. His name was Derek. If you met him at a company happy hour, you'd think he was harmless. Smiled a lot. Always said team and alignment. Kept a clean desk. Kept his calendar blocked like he was the CEO. He wasn't my boss. We were at the same level. But Derek had one skill that mattered more than technical talent. He knew how to look important. For months, I assumed we were fine. We weren't close, but we worked well enough together. We were both assigned to the same project, a system migration with a hard deadline. The kind of deadline that doesn't move because a contract says it doesn't. If we missed it, we'd pay penalties. The client would scream. Leadership would panic, and someone would become a convenient example. That someone was supposed to be me. It started with little things that were easy to brush off. A meeting invite sent without me, then forwarded later with, "Oops, thought you were included." A ticket reassigned to me at 4:58 p.m. with a note like, "Quick favor, you're faster at this." A Slack message that sounded friendly but always came with a countdown. "Can you handle this before tomorrow morning?" Annoying, but normal. Offices run on small inconveniences. The first time I felt the ground shift was a Friday. I'd completed a configuration change and documented it in the shared rollout checklist, a simple Google sheet we all used. I wrote the note, pasted the screenshot, and added my initials the way we'd all agreed. Monday morning, Derek walked into the daily stand-up with a calm face and said, "We're blocked because the config change wasn't documented. We need visibility." I remember the heat that went through my neck. I said, "It is documented." I added it Friday. Derek didn't argue. He just tilted his head slightly and said, "Huh? I'm looking at the sheet right now and I don't see it." And because everyone was in that familiar corporate trance, eyes flicking between faces, waiting for the quickest path back to their own work, they all opened the sheet. My note was gone. Not moved, not corrected. Gone. I didn't say, "What the hell?" because I'm not stupid. Instead, I said, "That's weird. I'll re-add it. Might have been overwritten." Derek nodded like a concerned teammate. "No worries. Let's just keep it tight this week." After the meeting, I went straight back to my desk and opened the sheet's version history. I expected to see something like accidental edit or row deleted, but when I pulled up the history, my entry didn't appear at all. Not as deleted. Not as changed. It was like it had never existed. That bothered me in a way I didn't fully understand yet. Because I know what it looks like when someone deletes a row. You still see it in the history. You still see an edit trail. I told myself I was overthinking. Maybe I'd typed it in the wrong row. Maybe I'd been tired. Maybe I'd saved a local copy and never updated the shared one. My brain offered me excuses because the alternative was uglier. Someone was touching my work on purpose. I re-added the note, attached the same screenshot, and this time I also copied myself in an email recap to the project distribution list. Not dramatic. Just FYI, config updated, documentation added. Derek replied with a thumbs up emoji and thanks. A normal person would stop there. I almost did. But over the next 2 weeks, it kept happening. Always in ways that made me look sloppy without being obviously malicious. A ticket would show as unassigned, even though I'd accepted it. A comment I'd left on a Jira issue would be missing, replaced by a bland line like, "Need update from owner." A calendar meeting would be rescheduled, and I'd be the only one who didn't get the update, so I'd join late and look unprepared. The pattern wasn't just inconvenience, it was reputation. Derek was quietly building a little story around me. The guy who forgets, the guy who misses, the guy who needs babysitting. And here's the worst part. If you confront someone like that too early, you sound paranoid. If you go to your manager with, "I think Derek is deleting my notes," you become the problem. You become emotional. You become hard to work with. So I did what I always do when something feels off. I started tracking. Nothing obsessive. No spreadsheet titled, "Derek is a snake." Just small habits. Screenshots before and after updates. Forwarding confirmation emails to my personal work archive folder. Taking notes immediately after meetings with times and attendees. The kind of thing you do when you want to be responsible. Derek noticed. He didn't say it, but I could feel it in the way he started speaking to me. A little softer, a little more performative. Then came the incident that made it clear this wasn't petty office friction. This was a setup. We had a client-facing milestone review on a Thursday. My part was to present a validation report and confirm we'd passed the internal checks. I'd done the work the night before. I'd exported the report, uploaded it to the shared drive, and posted the link in the meeting agenda doc. Thursday morning, 15 minutes before the call, Derek messaged me. "Hey, quick thing. The client is asking for the report in the template format. Can you swap it?" I said, "It is in the template format." He replied instantly, "The link in the agenda goes to an older draft. Might be from last week." That didn't make sense. I opened the agenda. The link was there. I clicked it. He was right. It wasn't my final report. It was an older version, missing key sections with a big red note at the top that literally said, "Draft. Do not send." My stomach dropped so hard it felt physical. I went to the folder where I'd uploaded the final version. The final file was still there. Same name, correct timestamp, sitting in the same directory. But the agenda link wasn't pointing to it. Someone had changed the link, and when I hovered over the hyperlink, I saw something I couldn't ignore. The edit on the agenda doc showed it was updated at a time that didn't match anything I'd been doing. The timeline didn't match. Not by minutes, by hours. And that was the first moment I understood what Derek had been counting on, that I'd panic, scramble, look guilty, and accept the blame to move forward. Instead, I took a breath, stared at the timestamps, and made a decision that would change the way I handled him from that day on. The client call still happened. We didn't delay it. We didn't circle back. Derek suggested we just present what we have and clean it up afterward. The way he said it made it sound reasonable, responsible even. But the implication was clear. If the draft went up on screen, it would be my name attached to it. I didn't argue. Not yet. During the call, I spoke less than usual. I answered questions carefully, stuck to facts I could verify in real time, and redirected anything that touched the report itself. Derek filled the silence effortlessly. He always did. He used phrases like, "We're still aligning internally," and "there was a minor documentation lag." No names, just enough distance. When the call ended, leadership thanked us and logged off. Derek stayed behind in the meeting room, leaned back in his chair, and said, "That was close." I asked him calmly, "Why was the agenda link changed?" He didn't look surprised. That was what stood out. He just shrugged and said, "Probably a sync issue. Those docs get messy when too many people touch them." That answer wasn't just weak. It was rehearsed. I nodded, said, "Got it," and went back to my desk. My hands were steady, but my jaw hurt from how hard I'd been clenching it. I replayed the last few weeks in my head. The missing notes, the reassigned tickets, the quiet corrections made without discussion. This wasn't one mistake. It was pressure applied slowly, consistently, in places most people never look. And I realized something else. Derek wasn't trying to beat me by doing better work. He was trying to win by controlling the record. That afternoon, I did something small but deliberate. I opened the activity logs for the shared drive, not because I expected to find a smoking gun, but because I needed to understand the terrain. In our company, Google Drive logs user actions separately from document version histories. Edits, link changes, permission adjustments. They don't always show up where people expect them to. Derek didn't know that, or if he did, he assumed no one would bother checking. I filtered by file name, then by date. There it was. The agenda document had been edited at 7:42 a.m. The link was changed at 7:43. My calendar showed I was already in another meeting at that time. Derek's calendar was blocked as focus time. That alone wasn't enough. Correlation isn't proof. But it was the first clean thread I could pull without looking defensive. I didn't confront him. I didn't screenshot it and send it to my manager. I kept working like nothing had changed. That seemed to bother him more than anger would have. Over the next week, Derek escalated. Not loudly. He was too careful for that. But structurally, he started copying our manager on messages that used words like visibility and risk. He framed questions so that any answer I gave sounded reactive. Just want to confirm you're on track with X. Or let me know if you're struggling with Y so we can support. Support. Always that word. At one point, he sent a recap email after a meeting we'd both attended. In it, he wrote, "Action item, waiting on my name to finalize validation." I was sitting there when the validation was finalized. I'd said it out loud. I replied, all politely, with a link to the completed file and the time it had been uploaded. Derek responded 5 minutes later. "Perfect. Thanks for jumping on that." Jumping on that, as if I'd been behind. That night, I went home angry in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not explosive anger, the quiet kind that keeps you awake. I kept thinking about how easily narratives form in workplaces, how quickly perception becomes reality if you don't interrupt it early. I also understood something else, and this part was uncomfortable. Derek wasn't panicking. He was confident. That meant he thought he was safe. The next morning, I stopped reacting entirely. No more justifications. No more defensive explanations. I answered questions once, clearly and in writing. I made sure anything important existed in at least 2 systems, a ticket and an email, a doc and a chat summary. Not to build a case, I told myself, but to do my job properly. Derek noticed the shift. He tried to regain control by tightening timelines, pushing for quick syncs without notes, making decisions verbally. Each time I followed up afterward with a brief written recap, just to confirm what we agreed on. He never objected. Objecting would have required acknowledging the record. Then came the performance check-in. Our manager scheduled a one-on-one with me, framed as routine. But the tone changed 5 minutes in. She said carefully, "I've been getting some concerns about missed follow-through." Concerns. Plural. She didn't accuse me. She didn't need to. She was doing what managers do when they think there might be smoke, testing the air. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I said, "Okay, can you tell me which items specifically?" She mentioned 3. I had documentation for all 3, each one time-stamped, each one showing completion before the stated deadlines. As I walked her through them, her expression shifted, not to anger, but to confusion. The story she'd been hearing didn't line up with what was in front of her. She said, "That's not what I was told." I replied, "I figured." And then for the first time since this started, I saw something flicker behind her eyes. The realization that this wasn't just a performance issue. It was a discrepancy. I didn't push. I didn't say Derek's name. I ended the meeting by saying, "If there's anything else you need from me, just let me know." When I got back to my desk, I had a message from Derek waiting. "Hey, heard your check-in was a bit intense. Everything okay?" I stared at it longer than I needed to. I typed back, "All good, just aligning timelines." A minute later, he replied with a smiley face. And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. By the middle of that week, the story around me had shifted just enough to be dangerous, not enough to trigger alarms, enough to make people watch. That's the worst place to be in an office. I could feel it in small things. A pause before someone answered me in a meeting, a manager asking, "Just double-checking," when I said something was done. Even praise started to sound conditional. "Good work on this. Just make sure it doesn't slip." Nothing had slipped. That was the moment I stopped thinking of this as a conflict with a coworker and started treating it like a system problem. Systems don't respond to emotions. They respond to patterns. I went back to the earliest incident I could clearly remember, the first missing documentation. I pulled the audit logs not just for the document, but for the folder, then for the parent folder, then for permissions. I wasn't hunting for proof yet. I was mapping behavior. What emerged wasn't dramatic. It was consistent. Derek didn't delete things outright. He replaced links. He reverted versions briefly, then restored them. He relied on the fact that most people don't check logs beyond the surface level. And when something went wrong, it always landed in a gray zone where intent was hard to prove. Except for one thing: time. Our company used multiple tools that recorded time differently. Google Drive used local user time. Jira logged server time. Slack displayed client-side timestamps. Most of the time, those differences didn't matter, unless someone was trying to rewrite the sequence of events. I started lining things up. A comment added before a decision that referenced information only available after. A ticket reassigned at a time when Derek claimed he was offline. A meeting recap sent minutes before the meeting technically ended. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they told a story that didn't quite flow. I remember sitting there late one evening, office mostly empty, lights dimmed automatically to save power. I had 3 screens open, each showing a different log. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. And that's when it clicked. Derek wasn't just shifting blame. He was backdating responsibility. He wanted it to look like decisions were made earlier than they were. Approvals were given before objections, and gaps existed before I ever touched the work. He wasn't erasing me from the timeline. He was placing me in it strategically. Once I saw that, everything else snapped into place. I stopped looking for what he changed and started looking for what couldn't possibly have happened in that order. That night, I realized I'd been saving someone who never wanted saving. The next day, I requested read-only access to a few internal dashboards for reporting accuracy. No one questioned it. I'd done similar pulls before. I also asked IT a casual question in a public channel about timestamp discrepancies between systems, framing it as curiosity for an upcoming audit. They answered, in detail. That answer mattered more than they knew. By Friday, I had a clean narrative. Not a dramatic one, not an accusatory one. Just a sequence of events that only made sense if one person had been quietly manipulating records. I still didn't say anything. Instead, I let Derek make his next move. It didn't take long. He scheduled a sync with our manager, looped me in, and titled it Project Risk Alignment. The agenda was vague, but I knew what it was. This was where he'd escalate from implication to conclusion. During the meeting, he spoke first. Calm, measured. He mentioned repeated documentation inconsistencies and missed handoffs. He never raised his voice. He never said my name directly when describing the problems. Just enough distance to appear professional. When it was my turn, I didn't defend myself. I said, "I agree there have been inconsistencies. I spent some time this week trying to understand why." That got their attention. I shared my screen, not with screenshots, with logs, timelines, side-by-side comparisons. I walked through one example slowly, explaining how the timestamps couldn't align unless something had been changed after the fact. I didn't accuse. I asked questions. How could this comment exist before the decision it references? Why does this link update show a user action during a blocked calendar period? Can someone help me understand how this approval appears before the ticket was created? The room went quiet, not tense, thoughtful. Derek leaned forward slightly like he was about to clarify. He didn't get the chance. Our manager asked, "Can you send me this after the meeting?" I said, "Of course, I already have." I'd scheduled the email the night before. Derek didn't speak for the rest of the call. When it ended, he messaged me privately. "This feels like overkill." I replied, "I just wanted the timeline to make sense." He didn't respond. That afternoon, IT security requested access to the project folder history. HR scheduled process clarification meetings. Leadership asked for a temporary pause on changes. Everything slowed down, and for the first time since this began, I wasn't reacting to Derek's moves. He was reacting to mine. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. The pause didn't feel calm. It felt like the air before a storm. Everyone polite, everyone watching their footing. It didn't announce an investigation. HR didn't use the word inquiry. Leadership framed it as process verification. That's how serious things start in grown-up offices. Quietly, carefully, with language designed to keep everyone calm while the ground shifts underneath them. Derek didn't take it well. At first, he tried to act untouched. He kept blocking his calendar, kept replying with one-line messages, kept smiling in meetings. But the control he'd relied on was gone. Changes required approval now. Edits were restricted. Every action left a deeper trail, and Derek hated trails. He started reaching out directly, not aggressive, familiar. "Hey man, feels like this got bigger than it needed to." Then, "We're on the same team here." Then finally, "Let's not make this something it isn't." I didn't respond to any of it. Because here's the thing. Once systems are watching, intent becomes irrelevant. All that matters is sequence. IT security pulled access logs across platforms and lined them up the way I had, but with authority. HR interviewed people separately, asking the same questions in slightly different ways. Management asked for written explanations instead of verbal summaries. Derek's entire strategy depended on ambiguity, and ambiguity doesn't survive documentation. The first cracks showed up in a meeting I wasn't even part of. Our manager called me afterward and said, "Quick question. Did you ever approve that rollback Derek referenced last month?" I said no. I'd objected to it, actually. I remembered because I'd followed up in writing when it happened. She went quiet for a second. Then she said, "That's what your notes show, but his email says otherwise." "What timestamp?" I asked. She told me. It was impossible. The email was sent before the meeting where the rollback was discussed, before the data existed, before the objection I supposedly approved. That was the moment it stopped being messy and became clear. From there, everything accelerated. Derek was asked to provide explanations for specific discrepancies. He tried to contextualize. He said things like, "I may have misspoken," and "I was going off memory." He suggested system lag. He suggested misunderstandings. But he couldn't suggest a reason why multiple tools showed him acting at times he claimed to be unavailable. He couldn't explain how links changed without version history updates. And he definitely couldn't explain why his clarifying emails always seemed to arrive just early enough to rewrite the story, except when cross-checked. I watched it happen from a distance. I wasn't in the rooms where decisions were being made. I didn't need to be. The work was done. One afternoon, Derek tried one last move. He messaged me and asked if we could talk off the record. I said no. An hour later, he requested a meeting with our manager and HR. No agenda this time. By the end of the day, his access was reduced to read-only. That's not something companies do lightly. The official reason came later. Violation of internal controls, falsification of records, breach of trust. Words that sound clinical until you realize what they mean in practice. He was escorted out 2 days later, quietly. No announcement, no spectacle. His calendar blocks vanished. His name stopped appearing on tickets. Someone else took over his responsibilities without comment. People noticed, but no one asked questions. Because everyone understood. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Like I could finally breathe without bracing. A week after it was over, my manager scheduled another one-on-one. This time the tone was different. She thanked me for how I'd handled everything, said I'd shown professional restraint, mentioned upcoming opportunities. I nodded, accepted it, moved on. That night, as I shut down my laptop, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't relieved he was gone. I was relieved I'd trusted myself when the timeline didn't make sense. Because once you see how someone tries to rewrite reality, quietly, politely, one timestamp at a time, you don't unsee it, and you don't need revenge. You just need the truth to line up. That's when the chaos ends. It ended the way most real things end. Not with a speech, not with applause, but with absence. Derek's name disappeared from the org chart. His profile photo vanished from Slack. Old meeting invites sat on calendars like fossils. No one announced anything. No warning, no explanation, just a quiet subtraction. Work resumed. That was the strangest part. The project moved faster without him. Decisions got made once. Notes stayed where they were written. When someone said they'd done something, it stayed done. No rewrites, no shadow edits, no pressure hiding behind politeness. A few weeks later, I realized I'd stopped checking logs, not because I was careless again, but because I didn't need to be vigilant anymore. The system wasn't fighting itself. My manager started looping me into conversations I hadn't been part of before. Strategy, not cleanup. Planning, not damage control. During one meeting, someone said, "We should run this by him first. He's good at spotting gaps." It wasn't praise, it was trust. The kind that forms quietly, the same way suspicion does, but harder to shake. I didn't tell anyone what really happened. Not because I was protecting Derek, but because there was nothing to gain from retelling it. The truth had already done its job. One evening, while cleaning out old files, I found the folder I'd used to keep my notes. Screenshots, timelines, backups. I opened it, stared at it for a minute, then deleted the whole thing. I didn't need it anymore. Here's what stayed with me, though. Before this, I believed workplace conflicts were mostly about personalities. Egos, tempers, misunderstandings. I thought if you stayed reasonable long enough, things would resolve. What I learned is that some people don't argue with you. They edit you. They don't confront facts. They rearrange them. And if you're not paying attention, you'll start defending yourself against a version of events you never lived. The only reason this didn't work on me wasn't brilliance or courage. It was patience. I didn't rush to be believed. I didn't demand justice. I let the record speak, because records don't get emotional. They just sit there, waiting to be lined up. Months later, someone new joined the team. During onboarding, they joked about how clean everything felt, how easy it was to follow decisions. I smiled and said nothing. That sense of calm, that was the real win. Not the promotion talk, not the validation, the quiet confidence that if something ever feels wrong again, I'll notice it early. I'll trust that instinct, and I won't let anyone convince me that a broken timeline is my fault. Because once you understand how truth actually survives, not loudly, not dramatically, but consistently, you stop being afraid of people who try to bend it. They can only move pieces around for so long. Eventually, the timeline always tells the story, and when it does, you don't need revenge. You just get your life back.